Last week we hosted Pastor Michael Cobb of the Danbury United Methodist Church. And today we're pleased to welcome back to Justice Southbury Reverend Tony Lorenzen, former minister at the Mattituck Unitarian Universalist Society, and now the minister at the UU Church in Meriden. So please welcome back Reverend Tony Lorenzen.
Hello, everybody. I believe you've got me coming over loud and clear. Yeah, so the best neighbors I've ever had were Matt and Kat and Coach and Karen. And I knew them for 4 years, beginning in the fall of 2008. Matt and Kat lived next door to me, and Coach and Karen lived across the street in this subdivision on the outskirts of Fort Worth, Texas. Matt and Kat were young, newlyweds. Coach and Karen had been married for decades. Matt and Kat they ran a little drilling company, and what they did was fracking. And Coach and Karen were both recently retired from the local school district where he was the football coach, and she taught math. All four of them were long-time, multiple-generation native Texans. That's important there if you've ever lived in Texas. They all owned guns. Kat and Coach had served in the Army. They owned pickup trucks and SUVs. They were all Methodists. They were all going to vote for John McCain that fall. When my family and I first arrived, oh boy, and they discovered we were Yankee transplants, they gave us a book called How to Speak Texan, from which we learned that bless your heart isn't a blessing. It is the exact opposite. We learned there's no such thing as chili with beans in it. We learned a lot of things from Matt and Kat and Coach and Karen and the book. We had a lot of hamburgers and beer in their garages. We ate Thanksgiving dinner and spent other holidays with them. They taught us how to check outside the door before we went out for rattlesnakes. They taught us how to nuke and poison the red ants when they got in our lawn. My environmentalism went straight out the window when nothing worked on the red ants. When I broke my foot over Christmas break one year, they gave me rides to the doctor's offices and to work at church. They would do things like knock on the door on a Saturday afternoon and say, "Hey, we're all going to the movies. Y'all want to go with us?" And we often did. During the fall harvest season, we got barrels and bags of freshly picked and shelled pecans from Matt's family farm in San Angelo. At first, when I showed up there in their neighborhood to be their neighbor, they thought I was a no-good Yankee carpet-bagging East Coast intellectual elitist liberal with my Harvard Divinity School bumper sticker. And I'll admit, the first weeks I knew them, I thought that they were, well, Texas rednecks. Our politics were different, our cultures were different, and some of our fundamental attitudes about how we saw the world were definitely different. But we were not just friendly, we were really good friends. To this day, probably the best neighbors I've ever had. They did what neighbors do. They loved you unconditionally because I was their neighbor. And it was good that we spent a lot of time in each other's company. After a couple years, I noticed that Coach would not let the N-word get out of his mouth or call somebody the F-word if they were queer, because he'd look at me and say, "Oh, I can't say that, Tony will get upset." And it's funny, but that's how people change. We learned a lot from them. I learned that everybody who owned a gun in Texas wasn't a crazy person. What we had with them, our house and their households, was what I would call beloved community. That's basically what good neighboring is. You're trying to create the beloved community with your neighbors. We hear the term beloved community thrown around a lot, especially in liberal circles, and we treat it like some kind of utopia. When we get to the beloved community, everyone will think just like us, with nice, liberal, progressive attitudes about everything, and therefore we'll all get along. Beloved community is paradise, because everyone's just like us. But that's not actually what beloved community means. Beloved community is a place where everyone belongs, and no one is a lesser person, and there are differences, hopefully celebrated, but plenty of differences. Beloved community is not perfect community. It's genuine and honest community that wants everyone included. The term beloved community actually comes from a philosopher theologian from England named Josiah Royce. He did his major work around the turn of the 19th, 20th century. He was later one of the people Martin Luther King liked to read and took up this idea of beloved community into the civil rights movement. Royce thought that the prevailing American philosophy of the time, the rugged individualism of Emerson and William James, was a bit misplaced because it left out community. And he thought that was as important to include as being an individual who can stand up for things and stand against the crowd. Royce's idea, beloved community, was a community built on a common set of loyalties to each other that crossed differences. Royce called things like racism and nationalism and militarism predatory loyalties, and that beloved community transformed those into actual, genuine, authentic community. Beloved community, he said, is a large, encompassing community whose life comprises and unifies all the social varieties and all the social communities which we know to exist and be real. In our current American polarized culture, we increasingly have lost those loyalties. Not only do those on the right frown on the existence of transgender people or people of color or immigrants, those on the left are not above discounting the humanity of those who they feel are ignorant, unenlightened, and backward. Something I had to get over with my neighbors in Texas so that we could have beloved community. Beloved community for Royce is something that people must, quote, work out the hard way, he said, in the nitty-gritty of everyday life with its difficulties and inconsistencies, errors, mistakes, imperfections, and messiness. It is the process of communicating and understanding one another in actual, imperfect, finite communities of grace, bound together by loyalty and striving toward the ultimate and ideal beloved community. If we are to create beloved community, we need to have more, not less, contact with our neighbors, especially those neighbors with whom we disagree. If you can be a good neighbor, you may be the only point of contact with the ability to reach a person in danger of being increasingly unreachable. People who self-identified as very well informed about politics and news voted for Harris by 8 points. People who professed themselves to be very uninformed about political news voted for Trump by 15 points. The American electorate being as uninformed possibly as it ever has been. And among those that paid attention, far too many used bad sources of information. that spread disinformation and outright lies. Exit polls noted that many Trump voters cited reasons for choosing Trump that were actually false and incorrect, just not true. But they were what they heard. The steady diet of lies that Trump and his enablers give us is not done to get people to believe the lies. It's propaganda. It's a tactic to make as many people as possible distrust as much information as possible and no longer know what to believe. And it works well, creating a false political narrative and even a false reality narrative is a political propaganda tactic that is used to make people vote away their democratic rights and freedoms. So it's a good thing that beloved community is about loving your neighbor, not liking your neighbor. So there's a lot of neighbors I got right now, as Martin Luther King used to say, that I don't like very much, but I can still love them. And when you love someone, you do what you can to help them. In his poem Mending Wall, Robert Frost writes, "Good fences make good neighbors." And we need those fences, not to create a permanent separation or to keep people out. But once in a while, we need to have good fences to have healthy boundaries. Good boundaries, healthy boundaries tend to make good neighbors and good relationships. Good neighbors can agree to disagree in good faith about many things. But basic human rights and dignity is not one of them. Do not confuse opinions with ethics. Atrocity requires dehumanization because it's exponentially more difficult to manipulate one people into discriminating against harming and killing others they see as people than it is to have them commit atrocity on people who are not human like them. Good neighbors do everything in their power to prevent their neighbor from dehumanizing others. Good fences make good neighbors, but when the fence the neighbor wants to put up is a border wall of dehumanization, and then it's time to make good trouble. Trouble and good troublemaking is a requirement of being a good neighbor. In the weeks and months and hopefully not too many years ahead of us, it's going to be necessary for a lot of us to love our neighbors enough to risk causing good trouble with our neighbors. So I encourage you to prepare yourself to respond to hateful rhetoric and behavior as a basic way of making good trouble. And this includes making a plan for how you personally can respond and how you can't. Not all of us are able to speak up, intervene, or act in a given situation. Different levels of privilege, personal and emotional and physical health, different sizes and strengths, and different personalities all contribute to what any one of us as an individual can and can't do. But what we all can do, what every single one of us can do, is to make a plan for how we will act and what we will say when the time comes. And my challenge to you this morning is to make that plan. Make a pledge to yourself to speak up and speak out to the best of your ability and to your level of personal safety. And this may require giving some serious thought to how far you are willing to go. It is never okay to deny another person's humanity and dignity. It's not agreeing to disagree when the disagreement is about the equal humanity of anyone. So part of your plan is being ready with the words you may need to speak when people's humanity is not respected. It may help you to prepare some phrases so that when you hear hateful or hurtful words, you know what to say. You have something on the tip of your tongue ready. So here are some helpful phrases you can say to intervene when you hear the hate. That's not funny to me. Those jokes are not okay. I'm sorry, what was that you just said? I need a moment to process that. Don't go away. please choose your words carefully and be respectful. That comment makes me uncomfortable. Maybe you don't realize the impact of your own words. Can you explain to me what you meant by that? You may not realize it, but what you said can be interpreted as racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic. Always assess your situation. Decide if this is a time when you can speak up. If you decide to speak up and challenge someone spouting hate and hurt, focus on their behavior and their words, not their person or their character. That's the Wrong There Committee. Make an appeal to them. Give them the benefit of the doubt that the hurtful words they've spoken don't reflect the goodness in their heart. Grant them the possibility that they might be a good neighbor. Grant them the humanity they may not be granting others. Set a boundary and draw a line. I don't let other adults speak to me or other adults that way. Or, I find that type of language offensive and hurtful, and I do not want you to use that around me. If you're in public, look for allies. Draw people into a conversation. Eventually, you may need to make a plan that goes beyond speaking out and speaking up and taking other action. Give some serious thought now, before you need to how much good trouble you're willing to cause to be a good neighbor to others. Who will your partners be? How will that trouble be organized? Be very realistic about the cost. Doing the right thing is sometimes very costly, but we can all do it. And we all do it not because we believe it will always change another person or always change the world. I wonder sometimes if the chief reason for doing the right thing is so that the world as it is does not change us. If your deepest core values go too long without being actively practiced, there will come a time, without you even realizing it, that they are no longer your values. If you value humanization and inclusion over dehumanization and exclusion, you can't let the dehumanization and othering of people happen without resistance. Speaking up, speaking out, because being a good neighbor sometimes demands that you cause good trouble.
Wow, Tony, thank you. That's amazing.